The Classical Age of Greece, stretching from the country's win over Persia in 479 BCE to Philip II of Macedon's conquest of Greece in 338 BCE, is a time most noted for its peak with the economy, military power, artistic, and intellectual innovation. It is argued that the true innovations of the time were that of philosophers, which contained icons in Greek philosophy such as Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. The nation flourished during this time, but lifestyles varied as always. In this video, we have gathered what life looked like for a Greek peasant, aristocrat, and monarch to truly represent the different lives lived at the same time. Introducing our first subject, the peasant woman. She begins her day at the crack of dawn, being woken up from the early sunrise. The woman begins her morning off by lathering herself in olive oil, a necessity before tending to her responsibilities in the sun. Her family kept many farm animals, such as cows, pigs, and chickens. Her responsibilities were to ensure that they had enough food and water, collecting eggs and milking cows. After taking care of the animals, she returns back indoors to begin preparing food for the day. Since it is early in the morning, she starts with breakfast, preparing bread, porridge, and cheese. To stay on top of tasks, she bakes bread and prepares vegetables for later. After finishing food, she goes to where she will spend majority of the day, textile production. Here, she spins wool so it can be woven into cloth. Women would spin wool with a spindle or flax into thread, which would then be woven into cloth. This task is extremely time-consuming, but a necessity to provide clothes for the family. At the time of filming, the agriculture season was in full force. Women at the time worked alongside their husbands and male relatives. They did not do exactly what the men did, but contributed by picking fruit, maintaining gardens, and gathering herbs. Our subject has about 6 children, though this number could have changed after filming as child mortality is common. Her boys spent some time at school, if not on the farm with the male figures of the family, while her daughter stayed at home and learned household skills. After more household chores, including cleaning, cooking, making more cheese, it is time for dinner, which was a collective of what was available. Today, since she was in the fields with everyone, she used vegetables and made a stew-like dish. After the evening meal with her family, as a collective, everyone cleaned together while sharing stories of their day. Since the sun was down and lighting was limited, there was nothing left for the family to do, so everyone went to bed. This was a day-to-day life for the peasant woman, a day based on survival with limited time to rest and leisure. Her leisure time was limited, yet she engaged with other women during communal activities and food preparation. This time was one where everyone's role was important and a contribution to the family's stability. We now meet our aristocratic woman, who was selected to showcase the different lives, though the time and genders are the same. In her large house, in her own room, in her own comfortable bed, our aristocratic woman begins her day shortly after dawn. She begins her morning routine by washing her face and hands, then styling her hair in a beautiful loose braid. Her beauty was reflected in how she maintained herself. In the women's quarters, she eats breakfast, usually a small meal of fruit, bread, olives, and cheese, accompanied with wine diluted with water. This meal is small as mentioned, but the later meals will be heavier. After breakfast, she goes to check on the servants to make sure the household was being attended to. She directs them with cooking, weaving, and cleaning, but does not do the actual labor herself. She does, however, participate in weaving since it is a heavily valued skill in Greek society. During this, she also socializes with other women who are doing the same. Also during this, her friends visit. Women of this class were restricted, and social interactions usually happened within their own homes. They gossiped on family matters and laughed. To add to the fun, her servants came to sing and play instruments, such as aulos, a type of flute. Aristocratic women engaged in a lot of leisure activities in comparison to our last subject. Adding on to leisure and entertainment, she often liked to engage in conversations surrounding philosophical ideologies, politics, and had extensive knowledge on arts, music, and poetry. Our subject was fortunate enough to have a level of education higher than those of lower classes. At this time, she has 3 children, but her family is growing. She has 2 sons and a daughter. The sons have access to education through private tutors, excelling in subjects such as literature and philosophy. Her daughter also gets educated, but from her mother, who teaches her social etiquette and how to maintain a household. It is now time for dinner, the biggest meal of the day. The entire family gathers for a formal dinner with many courses. The food eaten consisted of meat, fish, vegetables, and wine. The time after dinner was that of socializing, having intellectual conversations. Some days, she stays at home, and others, she attends women's banquets. At the end of the day, it is time for her to return to her designated space of privacy. She changes into her nightgown made of linen and begins to rest. While aristocrats were wealthier than most, there is a class above them, being the monarchs. It is important to note that there was no one monarch who ruled the entire nation, but more so one per city-state, such as Sparta, Athens, and Macedon. This subject will be based on a Spartan monarch, which had 2 royal families, since there were 2 kings. They focused on military and religious leadership. In the early morning, before dawn, our monarch rises from his slumber. Compared to other monarchs, Spartans do not engage in luxuries as much, and more reflected that of a training system that all Spartans went through. In the bathroom, our monarch grooms his beard and makes sure his hair hasn't grown, as long hair is impractical for battle. Time for breakfast. A quick meal that has been prepared by others. This meal was nutritious and made to energize him for the military activity he will engage in. First thing is inspecting the military soldiers and preparing for state duties. He spends a generous amount of his morning overseeing military preparations, as he is expected to lead the men into battle. Spartan society is extremely religious. The king participates at religious ceremonies, often taking place at the royal palace or public spaces like the Temple of Apollo, for example. The Spartan monarch's leisure time is spent by practicing military exercises, physical fitness, and hunting. Maintaining such an athletic figure is key to the Spartan king's identity. A leader cannot be lanky. Time for dinner. As mentioned earlier, the Spartan monarch almost rejects the luxuries an individual of his class would usually obtain. This plays into dinner as well, where it is communal and the food is the same as everyone else eats. The king eats with the people of Sparta. This is called succession, placing an emphasis on the idea that no one was above the collective Spartan identity. After dinner, the monarch returns to a private setting where he discusses military campaigns, foreign relations, and domestic concerns with trusted advisors. Finally, after such a physically and mentally demanding day, the monarch returns to his private quarters and goes to sleep, to repeat the routine the next day.